Hello and welcome back to Grim and Whim. Today we will be looking at some of Japan's most terrifying and interesting cryptids, monsters, paranormal creatures, however you might classify them. Regardless of what you would call them, they all have left a stamp on Japanese mythology and have also inspired all kinds of media. And so, without further ado, let's dive into these creatures today. So it goes without saying that as we go into these, descriptions of these Japanese creatures, there are, of course, Japanese pronunciations, and I'm going to do my best with pronouncing them. I watch a lot of anime, but I don't have any handle of the Japanese language, nor would I ever claim to. And so I'm going to do my best, but please be patient with me as I don't really have perfect Japanese pronunciation. But with that being said, let's get started with our first creature, which is the mountain-dwelling witch named Yama-uba. And I've also seen it spelled out as Yama Amba or Yam Anba. It kind of depends on the variations of this Japanese lore. But whatever her name, she is one creepy creature. And like her name, there are also variations in her appearance depending on who is telling the story, depending on what part of Japan, what region of Japan the story is coming from. Sometimes she is described more like an ogress or a troll, and others describe her as more of sort of a witch-like appearance, more classical, what we think of when we think of a witch. And sometimes she is described as being completely naked or having very, very little clothing, while other times she is described as wearing clothes that she kind of fashioned from tree bark. However, she is typically described as being dressed in a ripped red kimono. The Yama-uba has long, scraggly white hair and very withered, grimy skin, with a mouth that can grow and expand to devour her prey, much like how a snake expands its mouth to consume its prey. In some tales, Yama-uba is gentle and even tends to children who find themselves lost in the mountains. There are stories that say that Yama-uba actually will, care for children and nurse them back to health, so that way they can return to their village. However, in the darker rendition of the story, she is said to be very dangerous. In most of the stories I found, Yama-uba is capable of spiriting people away up into the mountains, and she will attack trespassers that happen to, come across her on her mountain. And I say her mountain because that really is how she feels. It's her mountain, her world. Her only weakness is said to be her soul that is hidden in a flower somewhere on the mountain. And so if you're lucky enough to find, this small flower on this huge mountain range, then I guess you have a chance. But otherwise, unless you're a child, I would maybe suggest not running into Yama-uba, and definitely keep your distance if you do happen to come upon her, because apparently she is very swift and can, like I said, spirit people away, and you'll never be heard from ever again. The next monster is actually pretty well known across the world as Japan's most infamous and probably one of their most terrifying water monsters. And this monster is named the Kappa. And these freaky humanoid reptile-like creatures are said to inhabit Japan's ponds and rivers. They are short in stature and scaly with a beak for its mouth. They sort of look like a cross between a turtle and a monkey, and while they are quite small, they are mighty, and they are known to balance a bowl on top of their head, and this bowl contains water, and if the water that the Kappa is holding somehow tilts and, falls out, then the Kappa loses its power. And so this bowl that sits atop its head is a very important part of the folklore. And what they say is that if a Kappa's bowl is emptied somehow, they lose their powers. And if a passerby bows to them, they'll have to bow back. The Kappa will bow back and therefore lose the water in their bowls. And so if you want to sort of trick a Kappa into, leaving you alone, if you bow, they will have to bow back. And that's because apparently, despite their kind of scary and intense nature, apparently the Kappas are very into politeness. And so if you bow, they have to bow back. It's like not even a choice. And so, if they lose the water in their bowls and someone refills their bowl with water and offers them that kindness, apparently you have an ally for life. And so it can kind of go either way. It can be a really negative experience, or it could be a very positive experience, depending on your knowledge of this creature and sort of knowing its quirks and what makes it tick and what can give you the advantage over the monster. That being said, even if you do know some of the tricks to kind of, outsmart the Kappa, most people will say that it is just best to steer clear of the Kappa, which means steering clear of the ponds and rivers. And according to the mythology, the Kappa will use its magic to lure children to the watery depths and drown them and drink their blood. And these tales were told to keep children from swimming in rivers and ponds. And so, like a lot of folklore, a lot of times it comes from adults trying to keep children safe and keep them from, getting into harm's way. And so it seems like this is sort of the case with the Kappa as well. And apparently the Kappa enjoys cucumbers. So if you do plan to visit Japan, that's one of my goals one day, and you find yourself alongside a pond or a river, maybe keep a cucumber in your bag just in case to, persuade the Kappa to leave you be. Otherwise, other strategies are to bow so that way the Kappa loses its water, or if you come across a Kappa and you feel kind of brave and you notice that in its bowl it doesn't have the water in there, maybe offer to fill the Kappa's bowl, and apparently you have an ally for life. And so do with that what you will. The next creature we're going to be talking about today is really more of an urban legend, and it has inspired a very popular game on stream, and that is Akamanto. And both the game and the creature share the name Akamanto, but you might also find that this creature is also named the Red Cape or the Red Vest. This Japanese urban legend is a masked figure who appears to people when they are in their most vulnerable position, and that is using a public toilet. And It's typically, like I said, public toilets or school toilets, kind of depending on the story. Either way, it's very creepy. Even creepier, though, is what could happen if you come upon this bathroom dwelling monster, and basically the spirit will ask you a question, and how you respond will determine your fate. In some versions of this story, the creature will ask you if you want red toilet paper or blue toilet paper, and other versions identify the choices as a red cloak or a blue cloak, or possibly a red cape versus a blue cape. But choosing either option will result in the individual being killed. And the best thing to do is for the individual to just completely ignore the spirit and reject both options and flee as fast as you can in order to survive. If you choose red versus blue instead of fleeing, you may find that your head will be forced into a toilet, sort of like a swirly, and it forces you into the toilet until you drown. Or you may be strangled or stabbed. But either way, it's best not to engage. And in all the stories I read, that seemed to be the common theme, is this creature will offer you choices, but you shouldn't accept either choice, and you should just move on with your day, run like the wind, and just leave the bathroom behind. The next Japanese cryptid is named the kitsune, and this creature is incredibly interesting. I have done quite a bit of research on this one alone just because I find it so interesting. I came upon it, I believe, on Reddit for the first time, and then also saw a YouTube video regarding, its abilities, and it is just a very interesting creature and a very interesting part of Japanese folklore. And basically, the kitsune is a fox-like being with shape-shifting abilities, and it has a very cunning nature, pretty similar to a fox, and it has the ability to trick humans. The creature also goes by the name fox spirit, witch animal, and goblin foxes. A kitsune may take on human form, and it learns this ability when it reaches a certain age, usually around 100 years old. So the actual age of the kitsune, it seems like it can live for an indeterminate amount of time. And so, like I said, around 100 years, although some sources were saying it's more like 50 years, basically around a certain age, the kitsune learns this ability to be able to transform into a human. And basically what they try to do is they typically try to impersonate beautiful women. And early on in Japan's history, people believed that if you came across a young, beautiful woman at night, like walking the street at night, it was likely a kitsune in disguise. And so people warned, if you come across this type of a woman and it's late at night, don't engage, don't talk to her, because it's likely a kitsune. The other supernatural abilities this creature has, depending on different sources. However, when I was going through the sources, these were the more commonly attributed abilities that they had. And so possession is one. So that's another reason why you don't want to come across one at night, and you definitely don't want to engage with one. They can generate fire or lightning. They also have the ability to manifest into other people's dreams, so kind of like Inception. They have the ability to fly. They also can become invisible, and they can create illusions so elaborate that they are almost indistinguishable from reality. In some of the tales about the kitsune, they apparently have even greater powers than what I described before, like the ability to bend time and space and drive people mad, or take fantastic shape, such as an incredibly tall tree, or even turn into a second moon in the sky. And they are often portrayed as tricksters. And to me, when I read about the kitsune, it kind of sounds like Loki. And it's almost as if Loki got a hold of the reality stone or something, which would have been crazy. If you are familiar with the Avengers, you're probably also familiar with the reality stone and how it can really warp reality. And if the kitsune has that ability, that's kind of crazy and definitely makes it a force to be reckoned with. Our final creature that we will be discussing today is the Fudakuchi Onna. And this is the one where I really don't think I have the correct pronunciation. So I'm going to refer to her as her other name, which is the Two-Mouthed Woman. And basically what this creature is at first glance, it looks just like a normal woman, but there is a secret underneath her long, dark locks. Concealed on the back of her head is a second mouth, and it's kind of like Professor Quirrell in Harry Potter, although in Professor Quirrell's case, it's like not just a mouth, it's like an entire head, with, Voldemort. But basically, the two-mouthed woman uses her hair to conceal this second mouth, but she also uses the hair to grab nearby food and feed her second mouth. She can actually manipulate her hair into almost like tentacles, and they can easily, grab things. Basically, the goal is to try to satiate this second mouth's almost like never-ending hunger. And the legend goes like this. In a small village, there lived a stingy miser who was unmarried and lived entirely by himself. So he wouldn't have another mouth to feed. So basically he wants a wife, but he doesn't want a wife that eats a lot or really eats at all, which is kind of a weird goal, but go off. Anyways, one day he did meet a beautiful woman who was so alluring that the villagers, all the villagers had taken notice of her. And basically, this woman did not eat anything, or at least people didn't see her eat anything. And because of this, the old miser decided to take her as his wife. And because she never ate a single thing and she was a hard worker, this miser thought, oh man, I've hit the jackpot. Like I have this, hardworking wife who also, doesn't eat, so I don't have to worry about wasting money on her. And strangely, despite the fact that this man had never seen this woman eat before, he began to wonder why his storage of rice was steadily decreasing. And one day he decided that he was going to figure out what was going on. So he pretends to go to work, but instead of going to work, he stays behind and spies on his new wife. So while he spies on his wife, he is horrified to see that his wife's hair begins to part down the middle, and basically her skull is split open, and it's revealed that she has this second mouth, and it's like this huge gaping mouth, and her hair begins to grab at rice and furiously feeds the second mouth. The man did not stay too long after seeing his new wife shoveling, all this rice into the back of her head, and he basically ran away and never saw her again. We don't really know what his fate was, but he just left, and that was that. There are several different versions of this tale. However, the main motif or connection throughout them is that the origin of this second mouth is often linked to how much a woman eats or how little she eats. And in many stories, the wife of the miser becomes a Furakuchi Onna because he is not feeding her enough. And to counteract his greedy nature, a second mouth mysteriously appears on the back of the woman's head. And the second mouth makes this woman miserable by making threats and demanding more and more food. And eventually the woman's hair, just begins to move on its own like a pair of serpents, and it allows the mouth to feed. And so whether the woman wants to or not, the second mouth is going to be fed, even if it has to take, matters into its own hands. In another version of this tale, the wife is actually the greedy one. And basically, she accidentally gets hit in the head by her husband's axe while he's out working. And so he's, chopping wood, and I guess, she somehow gets hit in the head by the axe, and the wound never heals. And, this wound in the back of her head, it never closes up, and is basically the origin of the second mouth. In one of the saddest variations, the woman is a mother who let her stepchild die of starvation while keeping her own offspring very well fed. And the second mouth appears on the back of the stepmother's head. And presumably this mouth, or Furakuchi Onna, is the spirit of the neglected stepchild who is now attached to the stepmother to exact their revenge. And in all variations, this Japanese monster is definitely shocking, and it's insatiable. It seems to never have enough. It's never satisfied with the food that it gets. And so, who knows? We may be walking around this earth right now, and there could absolutely be a woman who, possibly has this spirit or creature or whatever called the Furakuchi Onna on the back of their heads, which is terrifying to think about. I really hope that you enjoyed these tales. Again, sorry for the pronunciations. I tried my best. But if you liked this style of video, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And I will see you in the next one. Bye.
Thank you so much for joining me. It's goodbye for now, but I hope to haunt you again soon.